Good morning. I hope that you can see me okay. What I'm seeing on my screen is kind of a split screen with two images of myself. And we are here, and I want to welcome you to our conversation. And this week we are doing something that is a continuation of something I started back in September, I believe, the last time I was on. We're looking at seminars of Ernest Holmes. And I'm really excited about these seminars because I was not around when Ernest Holmes was around, and uh, the very first meeting places up in the San Bernardino Mountains took place. And this is wonderful to kind of revisit those early years and to see what Ernest Holmes was talking about and inspiring people with these lecture series that he did in those what he called spiritual advances. He didn't call them spiritual retreats; he called them spiritual advances. So this is what we're engaged in: is a spiritual advance when we are doing the studying and going within. It's not a retreat. It is actually an advance. So today I'm talking, I think I was very ambitious. I said I was going to do three different chapters from these seminars, but I may only get through one and hopefully two of them. And one of the things that we talk about often in religious science is law and love, right? And law and order is something that are often linked, and they have a very strange kind of connotation in today's world, right? We've had all these in pop culture. We've had tons of seasons of Law and Order of various stripes, right? There's the television program that has, oh, I think at least three and maybe four different franchises or spin-offs from within that Law and Order scheme. And we think about it more in terms of the kind of material world of law and order and law enforcement and maintaining the social order. And what we're looking at here is very different, you know. And sometimes I think, well, you know what, we enter this kind of abstract thought in a very interesting way, because when we are looking at wholeness, we're or not even looking at it. When we can't really look at wholeness, we have to experience wholeness. So when we are examining things, we are coming at it in a way that we're kind of separating things out. So abstract thought can feel that way, like there's a lot of separation and a lot of things that don't really come together in their wholeness for us as an experience as we're talking about it. We do have to separate it out in order to be able to talk about it, but we kind of have to try to get into that groove where we are integrating it and coming back into that wholeness as an experiential and as something that we can actually feel as us, right? So this spiritual law and order, the universe is spiritual law and order, and it makes sense, right? I mean, we know that there are physical laws in the universe that are operating, and they just operate, right? they're not they're not changing the law. They're just the laws. So the laws of physics, and as we get more and more sophisticated in our understanding of the law of physics, we kind of get our minds opened up in a very interesting way to how everything does work, right? How does it work? There are laws in the universe that are operative, and there is an order that comes out of those laws, and yet it is very dynamic. And as we are able to understand this on a scientific level more, we're kind of bringing science and spirituality together in a way that we can apprehend a lot of the things that Ernest Holmes was talking about during his time. So he begins this chapter by saying, the perception of law and order in the universe gives rise, or should give rise, to the authority and power of prayer, faith, and treatment. And that's what we're talking about today is treatment. How do we use the law? And how do we treat? How does it work? And he goes on to say, in metaphysics, we have 3 offices to perform, 2 in particular. One is to soar in the clouds, courting the mystical element and the intuitive perception, which is beautiful, and we love to do it. We must soar and we must speculate. We draw fire from heaven, and we know that God speaks to the heart more than to the intellect. So Ernest Holmes was very, very clear about this, that yes, our intellect is a God-given gift, and yet we have to bring those two together in some way. And through the experience is where, and the heart is where we kind of get this engine going for us. The intellect is not complete without the heart in action. And he talks a lot about fire, and I love that about Ernest Holmes, the fire that we get, and that spark that ignites the fire, that divine spark that ignites the fire in us so that we can give effective treatments. And for some reason, that has always, well, I think as human beings, fire is such a primary element, and it carries a lot of weight in our development and evolution as a species. And we respond to that. We respond to that idea of fire and what fire has given us. Fire in the form of that elemental thing that we see in our fireplaces or we see outside, or as we've experienced in these tremendous fires that we've had. It's very elemental, but also the harnessing of that fire in the form of electricity and all of the technological advances that humankind has made over these past let's say 60 or 70 years are are also a manifestation of that fire, that element of fire. But there's also that spiritual fire, right, that is within us, that we know as something that is transcendent and beyond the physical. So we're bringing both the spirit and the physical together in this. And he goes on to say, on the other hand, there comes a time when we must apply these wonderful truths that we know and take them about the highways and byways of life. And we must feel that we have an authority in this activity. I do not think a spiritual mind treatment must be an inspiration. Writers who write commercially just write. That is their business. Singers who sing commercially sing, whether they are inspired or not. One in our field, however, cannot wait for inspiration. It's a mistake to say, I will give a treatment when I feel like giving a treatment. We do not feel like giving a treatment. We give a treatment. We bringing to bear upon it as much feeling as we can at any particular time. And that feeling that he's talking about is the fire in the treatment. So, what does he mean by all of this? That as practitioners, and we all who follow these teachings are practitioners of science of mind. When someone comes to us, we can't just turn them away and say, well, I'm not inspired right now. I'm not going to be able to treat you because I have no inspiration. We rise to the occasion, and we give the treatment. We enter into that spiritual mind treatment, and of course, our technology for that is designed to bring us into that place where we are receptive and inspired. So, in the doing, right? This is all about in the doing, is where we get the fire. And, sometimes I know as I'm giving a treatment, there are times when, oh, I really feel it. I can just feel this power surging through me. And, I think that's inspiration. And other times I am giving the treatment, but it's different. It has a different quality. And it doesn't mean that either one of those states is any less effective. We are doing the treatment, and we are we are bringing to bear our entire selves and aligning with spirit. And he goes on to say, our work is not an activity wherein we lose ourselves, either in the mysticism of the spiritual realm or the too often psychic hallucination of the subjective realm. Rather, we perceive that the universe is a combination of spirit and law and order, and that one is the complement of the other. Our perception that the universe has this dual reality or unity brings the okay, I'm losing this. Okay, brings inspiration to this inspiration of spirit directly, extending through man to that which is to be accomplished on earth. We do not say, let God do it, in the sense that God will bake the biscuits. We say, let God do it, only in the sense that God is all there is, or let God in me do it. In other words, a metaphysician is not one, in my estimation, who says that people are not sick or hungry, poor, weak, or unhappy, or that they are not born in this world and die to it. Rather, he is one, it seems to me, who includes all that is in what is, the ups and downs, the good and bad, without ever having to admit that there is any final dualism, any final evil, or any final problem of the spirit. Problems are of the mind. So let's unpack this a little bit. We are coming in the treatment, as I said, into this place where there is no duality, there is no separation, right? And 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 it's kind of hard to wrap our minds around sometimes, because in many traditions it is someone, that force outside of us is going to do the work, right? And Ernest Holmes uses that kind of homey saying, God's going to bake the biscuits, right? Well, it's a very apt description. If we're going to achieve something materially, um, God's not in the kitchen baking our biscuits. We are the ones who are doing that, right? Um, and the spiritual part of that is that we have that alignment and that fire from heaven that is actually working through us at that point, right? And we are making it happen in the physical realm as these individual expressions of God. So it's not an outside force that is making it happen. We're not just little pawns in a great game of life, right? We are active and we are a part of the whole. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. And, I think it's really important for us also to really pay heed to this particular paragraph because oftentimes, we might be tempted to say, well, this just doesn't exist. There's no sickness, right? There's no hunger. There's none of that happening, and, there's a perfect universe. And that actually uh, separates us from the person who is suffering, or maybe a whole group of people who are suffering in that moment. And, it calls us in a different way to act in a different way. Yes, we are giving a spiritual mind treatment for ourselves as practitioners to see the wholeness of everything, and also for the person who's come to us for help, or maybe a whole group of people have come to us for help. And we are doing that spiritual mind treatment to actually up level everyone, right? Up level us to see the reality, the absolute reality of the universe, that it's operating through love and law. But we can't say, you're not, we can't deny that a person who has come to us is not needing something, needing a treatment. We don't deny that. We don't deny the condition necessarily, that they're sick and hungry, but we do look to that absolute. He goes on to say, we perceive that the universe is a thing of beauty, of love. I believe that the impulsion of the universe is love, and its propulsion is law, and one balances the other. It is inconceivable that it could be otherwise. One is personal, the other impersonal. It seems to me that we are dealing with something that starts with pure intelligence, when the movement of this intelligence, which we call thought or contemplation, bends its specialization of law through a particular phase or mode of thought. It creates a certain sense, the law of our own being, out of the law of all being. It creates, in a certain sense, the law of its own being out of the law of all being. And that's a key phrase. This law, being the movement of intelligence and creativity, carries with it, by the nature and constitution of its own being, and the being of self-existence upon which it relies, everything necessary to impel and propel itself into action. For us, it will be action through us. Therefore, law set in motion produces the result. So that propulsion is the law, and the impulsion is love. So they're working together, and the law set in motion, impelled by love, produces the result. And that's why love is so important, right? I know that Ernest Holmes, and later in life, said that he may have put too much emphasis on law rather than love. And I don't really see that. I see Ernest Holmes as a very loving person who really was, his calling was to explore all these philosophies, and he was looking at truth. What is the truth of our being? And I think in that, that is an intellectual endeavor in a lot of ways. He was cultivating the heart at the same time, and people who knew him, um, found his presence healing in and of itself. And it's wonderful to think about someone who is uh, really set on understanding what the teachings of the great teachers of the world were really about. And that's what he set out to find out. What is it really about? And, that's a big philosophical question, and a question that humankind has been embarking on for many, many years, right? Well, since we became conscious. And I do believe that we were formed conscious. We came into it more and more as we evolved. And I'm going to go off on a tangent here. I love, all of the new archaeology that's finding different branches of the human experience, right? All of the different branches that came into creating the modern human. And we used to make fun of Neanderthals, for example. And yet, we have that in our DNA. That's part of who we are now. And there's other branches that we're finding. Oh my goodness, that's part of who we are now as human beings. The species, that roams the earth now, and we are conscious. We are coming to kind of bring all those things together. It's exciting to me to think about that. We have been conscious, and all of those different parts that went into creating us as we exist now are absolutely essential to our being. And I think that this paragraph that I'm reading next is a very important one. I believe that no matter how much we shall love, and we do not love enough, for love is the impulsion, that love alone, as a mere sentiment, will not do anything. And this is the important thing. As mere sentiment, it will not do anything. For instance, to say, God is all there is not a spiritual mind treatment. It is a statement of our conviction. Too many people think it is a treatment. It is only when we apply our concept of the allness and the isness and the beingness of this one power. It is only when we distribute the power definitely toward a concrete manifestation, or become aware of the spirit in such a way that it automatically and impersonally reflects in our environment, helping everything it touches, that we become the instrument for that which we have identified in mind. We have these two great realities, identification and instrumentality. And we know that the great sages, for example, in the prayer of Francis, that is his prayer. May I be an instrument of peace. That's part of that prayer. May I be an instrument of peace. So that is something that we've understood as metaphysicians, that we have that ability to be an instrument of the divine. And it's not just in saying a partial thing, right? A very partial thing. God is all there is. Yes, we can know that. We can say those words, but it is bringing it all together when we apply our concept of the allness and isness and beingness of the one power. And then, we realize that. That's the realization. We realize that. And then we are distributing that in, into the world. And that's when we get the manifestation of that new thought that we have put out there into the situation, into the condition. And the new thought, can produces the healing. So this is how it works, and I think Ernest Holmes has always, shows us how it works in his writings. How does this work? And he never says, he says to try it, it's not dogmatic and it's not pounding us in the head or anything. He just says, try it, see if it works. And when we do and we experience results, we have our proof. And I think this is an interesting comment that he makes next. We shall never understand the science of mind, and this is on page 40, as a science if we depend only upon the inspiration of spiritual illumination, which I value above everything else, or if we depend only on the idea that our individual thought is something somewhere. We have no individual power. There is no such thing. I have no individual mathematics. I individualize it. The moment I imagine that I have my own individual mathematics, I am limited in its use to the numbers I can handle. And this is always interesting to think about as we move forward, or to keep in mind. Maybe we don't have to dwell on it necessarily, but I think this is what we're talking about. There is this. There's not only one thing, right? There's not only the individual, and oftentimes I think there's been a misunderstanding of Ernest Holmes of putting too much emphasis on the individual, and I know I've felt like that in the past. Yes, the individual exists, right? We are individual expressions of God. However, there is something so much greater, right? I mean, he says this right here. There's something so much greater. We don't have an individual power. There's no such thing, right? And the thing he talks about is mathematics, I have no individual mathematics. Mathematics is a language. If it's not able to describe and communicate, then it's very limited in what it can do. And it's limited to only what I can apprehend as an individual. And I think this is very, very interesting to come at in different ways. Uh, I recently watched a Netflix a series called Dispatches from Elsewhere. And that Elsewhere is like this perfect place, this utopia, this creative place. And it's sort of, it resonated with me because I think, oh yeah, when we're doing our work, yes, we are in that creative field, right? And where there's infinite possibilities, and we create out of that, and it becomes this incredible. It, it can become the absolute, right? And in beauty and engagement and just that pure life force being presented, right? And so I'm seeing all these pictures in my head from watching this series. But it was about art and about doing art, and it was about our individual uh, neuroses and what happens when we feel like it's all on us. It's just us, that we don't have that connection. And in this case, it was talking about the human connection, which is absolutely necessary. But in this sense, we're also thinking about that spiritual connection, right? So as we move forward, right, we're not just we are individuals, it's very important, but we also are something we're a part of something much greater. We're not just individual human beings, we're also a part of the whole species, right, of humans. This is what we are. And when we realize that, we can even take a step further and realize, oh, well, we're part of the animal kingdom. We're a part of that. And we can imagine ourselves as other creatures must feel, right? We don't necessarily have the same feelings or approach things the same way, but we understand the consciousness of other creatures. So it is a process, right? It is a process of coming to know ourselves, but also to know the greater and to be instruments of that greater, and not to fall prey to thinking that we can do it all on our own, because none of us can. None of us do. It's just not possible. We are never, never alone in this world. And I think that's something I would like to just say we bring to bear during the holidays, right? We have a lot of different events. We do things together. We we create a community. We create all kinds of things, and that doesn't deny that there is loss. There is all of these other things of life. It is accepting it all and moving forward with it all and being able to hold it all and have that spark of joy always present in us. So we are coming we're getting close to the end of our talk this morning, but I want to read another passage that I found very important here on page 41. And the last paragraph: since the universal mind is resident everywhere and also of necessity within us, this logical argument, assumption, or spiritual assertion is made only within ourselves. We do not send out anything. We do not trade anything, or will or wish anything. I would like to say at this point that only those who are already familiar with this field of thought know what is implied here. And this is not said to convey any sense of superiority, for it isn't meant that way. It must be remembered, however, that this field of thought is not physiology and it's not psychology. We recognize and acknowledge these two fields, and we should understand and know them. For instance, it is well for us to know that at the core of every neurosis, there are four elements: a sense of rejection, guilt, insecurity, or anxiety. It is well to know that the fundamental need of our emotional nature is to be wanted, needed, and loved, and that the ego must not be rejected, and the mind must be forgiven. This knowledge alone, rightly handled, would probably heal half of the people who are sick. And this is the important part of this particular passage. However, we desire to go beyond these fields, beyond the neurosis and the neurotic, to that which made the neurosis, which made the neurotic, to that which made it possible for there to be the neurosis that made the neurotic. We shall never reach the ultimate, the absolute, however, while we remain in any one field. There are things in apparent relationship to one another. Excuse me, which seemingly only found their causation from such relationship, instead of that to which all relationships must inevitably and eternally be relative. Troward said it another way, saying, after we enter the absolute to such a degree as we withdraw from the relative. This is a dangerous statement because too many people do not realize that the relative is the absolute at the level of the relative. Okay, what does that mean? My goodness, that is a lot of words. And the way that I understand this is that we are moving into this metaphysical field. Yes, these fields of physiology and psychology, yes, they can do a lot of healing, right? And we want to work, we want to team up with practitioners in those fields, and we want to treat the whole person, but we want to move beyond the psychological and the physical, right? The physiology and the psychology. We want to move into that realm of spirit to understand that the relative, which our world is relative to the our world is relative. We have all of these different kinds of conditionalities that we live in the material world. This is relative to this is relative to this is relative to this, all of that, right? A lot of variables are taking place. But this relative, this realm that we live in, is the absolute at the level of the relative. So it's still one and the same. In other words, that we are in many ways seeing through the glass darkly at the moment. And at the moment when we can open ourselves to that absolute and understand in every part of us that there is that unity, there is that unified field that we are operating in, where everything is really the absolute. So I know that when we have a deep insight like that, it is oftentimes very difficult to convey it because it is experiential. It is something that we may get, in an instant, but it's difficult to hold on to oftentimes. It's difficult for us to maintain that. We may maintain it as an intellectual thought, but to embody it is something that we work at, we practice, we do our spiritual work, and we come to realize that. And I really do think that Ernest Holmes had those moments of illumination, that he did have those moments of illumination. And I think he may have, reached a place of clarity. And his teaching certainly reflects that. And his pointing the way for us has been extremely powerful. So I just want to say, as we move forward in these high holy days that we are celebrating, that yes, we are we are living in this incredible field of creativity right here and right now. It's true. And as we do all the things that we do in this Christmas season, we have a time. This is a time of rekindling that, and it's something that for those of us in the West, Christianity is very, very, very present. With the Christmas trees, all of the different accoutrements that come with the holidays, the decorations, the lights, the celebrations, all of that. They are part of something that is so much deeper, right? They go to that very elemental part of our humanity as we are remembering the cycles of life, right? We're remembering this time of quietness going into, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, going into winter. That's that quietness and that ability for that hope that we have for the light to return. And after this period of darkness, there's a lot of things that go into it, and it's all very powerful. And I think as I've lived longer, there is something that has occurred in me. I look forward to these things. They haven't gotten old for me. In fact, they've become younger and more vibrant every year. And I feel like I am understanding or stepping into life more than I ever have before. And I'm absolutely thrilled about that. So that's what our spiritual work does. It allows us to come to those places where we are stepping into life more and more. And as you celebrate, step into life more. So everyone have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season, whatever you may be celebrating. I'm into celebrating everything at this point in my life. Whatever we can celebrate, let's celebrate and celebrate well. Have a wonderful week.